The silver dunes of Karath Prime shimmered beneath twin suns, their fierce light refracting off crystalline grains that stretched to the horizon. Alex Greaves tightened his grip on the joystick of his battered starcruiser, the Vanguard Eclipse, as the heat haze warped the image of the looming wreckage ahead. The distress beacon had led him here, to the volatile badlands of this uninhabited world, a planet infamous for its lethal atmospheric storms and barren landscapes. But someone had survived. The faint signature of a life form blinked on his console, growing stronger as Alex brought his craft down with a crunch of shifting sand. His boots sank slightly as he disembarked, the dry air swirling around him. As he approached the source of the signal, his trained eyes caught movement, a figure lying prone amidst jagged shards of what had once been a sleek diplomatic vessel. "Hello?" Alex called out, his voice muffled by his breathing mask. The figure stirred, a young woman, or something close to it. Her violet skin shimmered faintly, marked with silver patterns that pulsed weakly like dying embers. Her eyes, large and almond-shaped, fluttered open, locking onto Alex's with an intensity that froze him mid-step. "You came," she whispered, her voice musical but strained. "I'm here to help," Alex said, kneeling beside her. "What happened?" "Ambush," she murmured. "They didn't want me to reach the Accord summit. They destroyed my ship. I thought," her words faltered as her breath hitched. "It doesn't matter. Please, don't leave." "Not planning on it," Alex reassured her, scanning her body for injuries. Her left leg was mangled, the intricate material of her suit torn and stained with iridescent blood. "We need to get you to my ship. Can you move?" Her hand shot out, gripping his arm with surprising strength. "No," she said, panic flickering in her gaze. "You must claim me first." Alex blinked. "Claim you? What does that mean?" Her silver markings flared brighter as her voice took on a desperate edge. "My people, the Renari, we bind our fates to those who save our lives. Without the bond, I will perish. Please, there's no time to explain. Just say you accept." "What? I don't even." "Say it," she pleaded, her voice breaking. Alex exhaled sharply. "Fine, I accept. Whatever this is, just stay with me." The moment the words left his mouth, the air around them shimmered, and an electric hum coursed through Alex's body. Zana gasped, her markings glowing brilliantly before fading into a soft, steady pulse. When she opened her eyes again, her expression was unreadable. "It's done," she said softly. "We are bound." Back aboard the Vanguard Eclipse, Alex wrestled with a torrent of questions as the alien woman. Zana, as she had introduced herself, rested in his medical bay. The ship's AI, an outdated but sharp-tongued program named Sarah, provided a steady stream of commentary as Alex navigated the star charts. "Are you aware that you've just entered a legally binding life debt with a Renari diplomat?" Sarah quipped, her tone dry. "No," Alex grumbled, "but I'm guessing you're about to tell me." "Renari bonds are irreversible," Sarah continued. "She's not exaggerating when she says she would have died without it. The bond stabilizes their life force after extreme trauma, but it also creates a shared connection. Her survival is now partially tied to your presence." Alex groaned, running a hand through his dark hair. "Great, just what I needed." She also neglected to mention that breaking the bond is considered a crime punishable by death among her people, Sarah added cheerfully. "Of course it is." Zana stirred, her luminous eyes meeting his as he entered the med bay. She looked better. Color had returned to her skin, and her injuries were healing rapidly, aided by the ship's advanced medical tech. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I know this is an inconvenience for you." "That's putting it lightly," Alex muttered, crossing his arms. "Care to explain why I just got dragged into an interstellar marriage?" Her cheeks flushed a faint silver, and she looked away. "It's not marriage, not in your sense of the word. The bond is sacred among my people. It ensures loyalty, trust, and survival. I couldn't have made it without you." Alex sighed. "Fine. So what happens now?" Zana hesitated. "You take me to the Accord summit on Tarsus. If I don't deliver my message, a war will break out that could consume this entire sector." "War?" Alex raised an eyebrow. That's a lot of pressure to put on one message. It's more than a message, Zana said gravely. It's a treaty, one that could unify over 50 systems under a single banner of peace. The factions opposing it would do anything to stop me. Alex leaned against the wall, studying her. She was clearly hiding something, but he couldn't deny the urgency in her tone, or the strange, instinctive pull he now felt toward her. All right, he said finally. Tarsus it is. But once this is over, we're finding a way to break this bond. Zana's expression tightened, but she nodded. Of course. The journey to Tarsus was anything but smooth. The first attack came mere hours after they left Korath Prime. A sleek, black ship dropped out of hyperspace and opened fire without warning. Incoming. Shields at 30%. Sarah blared. Hold on. Alex shouted, twisting the Vanguard Eclipse into a sharp dive. Zana clung to the co-pilot's seat, her expression grim as Alex executed a series of evasive maneuvers. They're consortium mercenaries, she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. Hired assassins. They won't stop until I'm dead. Great. Any suggestions? Get us out of their targeting range, and I'll handle the rest. Alex didn't have time to argue. With a deft flick of the controls, he sent the ship into a barrel roll, narrowly avoiding a plasma bolt. Zana closed her eyes, her markings glowing faintly as she murmured something under her breath. A low hum filled the cockpit, and suddenly, the attacking ship veered off course, its systems sparking uncontrollably before it exploded in a fiery burst. Alex stared at her. What the hell was that? Renari techniques, she said, looking exhausted but satisfied. I disrupted their systems. Remind me not to get on your bad side, Alex muttered, steering the ship back on course. As they neared Tarsus, the stakes became clearer. Zana revealed the true nature of the treaty she carried. An agreement that would dismantle the consortium's control over trade routes in the Outer Rim, effectively cutting off their primary source of power. They've been exploiting smaller systems for decades, she explained. This treaty will give those systems autonomy and a voice in galactic politics. And you think the consortium's just going to let that happen? Alex asked skeptically. No, Zana admitted. That's why we need allies. Their arrival on Tarsus was met with a tense reception. The summit was already under heavy security, but the shadow of betrayal loomed large. As Alex and Zana navigated the labyrinthine halls of the Accord Embassy, whispers of consortium spies and impending attacks followed them like ghosts. And then, one night, as Alex stood guard outside Zana's quarters, a shadow moved in the corner of his eye. Before he could react, a blade whistled through the air, aimed straight for Zana. The blade seemed to shimmer as it streaked toward Zana, cutting through the dim light of the embassy hall like a sliver of death. Alex's body reacted faster than his thoughts. He dove forward, his hand snapping out to intercept the projectile. The edge bit into his palm, drawing blood, but the force wasn't enough to break bone. With a sharp grunt, he yanked the weapon free, tossing it to the ground. His eyes darted to the source of the attack, a figure cloaked in black, melding seamlessly with the shadows of the corridor. The assassin moved fast, lunging at Alex with a second blade. Alex sidestepped, driving his shoulder into the attacker's midsection and slamming them against the wall. Zana, roused by the commotion, emerged from her quarters. Her markings flared with brilliance, and a pulse of energy rippled from her, knocking the assassin back. The figure scrambled to their feet, but before they could retreat, Zana raised a hand. "Stop!" she commanded, her voice laced with a resonance that made the air hum. The assassin froze, their body trembling as if caught in invisible bonds. "What did you do?" Alex asked, panting. "Temporal stasis," Zana said, her tone grim. "It won't last long. Get their mask." Alex didn't hesitate. He yanked the dark visor off the assassin's face, revealing a young woman with sharp, angular features and pale green skin. Her eyes burned with fury, but also fear. "A Darnoth," Zana muttered. "Friend of yours?" Alex asked dryly. "Far from it. The Darnoth are mercenaries loyal to the consortium." She turned to the assassin, her voice cold. "Who sent you?" The woman sneered. "You already know." "Answer her," Alex growled, gripping the assassin's collar. The woman laughed harshly. You think this ends with me? There are others. And even if you make it to the summit, the treaty will die with you. Zana's markings pulsed brighter, and the assassin winced, her muscles locking tighter under the pressure of Zana's stasis field. Who are they? Zana demanded. The woman remained silent, her expression defiant. She's stalling, Alex said. Zana, we need to move. Reluctantly, Zana released her hold, and the assassin crumpled to the floor, unconscious. The assassination attempt changed everything. The Accord Summit was no longer just a negotiation. It was a battlefield of shadows, and the lines between ally and enemy were growing blurrier by the moment. Security was doubled, and Alex found himself acting as Zana's de facto bodyguard. The bond between them had grown stronger, manifesting in subtle but undeniable ways. He could sense her emotions, flashes of anxiety, determination, and something softer, more complicated. Zana, for her part, seemed equally affected. When Alex was near, her markings glowed faintly, as though drawing strength from his presence. You're more than you seem, Zana said one night as they reviewed the summit's security protocols in her quarters. Alex smirked. You're just figuring that out now? I mean it, she said, studying him with those luminous eyes. You've adapted to this bond faster than I thought possible. It's unusual. Alex shrugged. Guess I'm a quick learner. But Zana's gaze didn't waver. No, it's more than that. There's something about you, Alex. Something that feels familiar. He frowned, but before he could respond, an urgent chime echoed through the room. Sarah's voice crackled over the comms. Sorry to interrupt your bonding session, but we've got a situation. The Accord Summit was held in the Grand Convocation Chamber, a massive dome of glass and steel suspended over Tarsus's crystalline ocean. Delegates from dozens of systems gathered in their finest regalia, their voices a cacophony of languages and agendas. Zana took her place at the central podium, her presence commanding despite the tension crackling in the air. Alex stood a few paces behind her, scanning the crowd for any signs of trouble. As Zana began her speech, outlining the treaty's terms and its potential to reshape galactic politics, Alex's instincts prickled. Something wasn't right. Sarah, he murmured, his voice low. Anything on the scanners? Nothing unusual, Sarah replied. But I'm detecting increased comm traffic outside the chamber. Could be nothing, or it could be the calm before the storm. Alex's hand hovered near his sidearm. He scanned the crowd again, his eyes landing on a group of delegates seated near the back. They were too still, their gazes fixed not on Zana, but on the ceiling above her. He followed their line of sight and froze. A small, metallic device clung to the glass dome, a bomb, its timer ticking down. Zana! Alex barked, cutting through her speech. She turned, startled. What? Get down! Alex bolted toward the podium, grabbing Zana and pulling her to the ground just as the device detonated. The explosion rocked the chamber, shattering glass and sending delegates screaming in all directions. Smoke filled the air, and Alex's ears rang as he pushed himself up, shielding Zana with his body. Through the chaos, he spotted armed figures entering the chamber, their weapons trained on the remaining delegates. Consortium agents, Zana muttered, her voice grim. Alex nodded, drawing his blaster. Stay close. The chamber erupted into chaos as the attackers opened fire. Alex returned fire, taking down 2 agents before dragging Zana toward a side exit. We need to get out of here, he said. No, Zana said firmly. We need to finish this. If the treaty isn't signed today, everything we've done will be for nothing. And how are we supposed to do that with an army trying to kill us? Zana's markings flared, and she extended a hand. A shimmering barrier formed around them, deflecting incoming fire. We fight, she said simply. Alex stared at her for a moment, then smirked. You're a hell of a diplomat, you know that? Zana's shimmering barrier pulsed with energy, deflecting a fresh barrage of plasma bolts from the advancing consortium agents. The glowing shield was strong, but Alex could see the strain etched across her face. This isn't going to hold forever, he shouted over the chaos. I just need time. Zana shot back, her voice tight with concentration. Alex nodded, stepping out from behind the barrier to return fire. He moved like a soldier, his blaster finding its mark with lethal precision. The consortium agents were highly trained, but their armor wasn't built for sustained combat. One by one, they fell under Alex's relentless assault. Behind him, Zana crouched low, her markings glowing brighter as she worked her Renari techniques. She murmured an ancient chant, weaving an intricate lattice of energy that arced outward, seeping into the chamber's damaged systems. "What are you doing?" Alex asked, ducking back behind the barrier as another wave of attackers stormed in. "Restoring security protocols," Zana replied. "If I can override the embassy's systems, I can lock the doors and trap them inside." "And us with them," Alex pointed out. Zana gave him a faint smile. "Not if you trust me." "Let's just say I'm getting used to the idea," Alex muttered, turning back to fire on the attackers. The tide began to turn as Zana's energy infused the chamber's systems. The doors slammed shut with a resounding clang, cutting off reinforcements. Automated turrets emerged from hidden compartments in the walls, swiveling to target the remaining agents. But just as Alex and Zana caught their breath, a voice echoed through the smoke-filled chamber, amplified by a portable comms unit. "Well done, Lady Zana," the voice drawled, smooth and mocking. "I knew you'd survive, but I have to admit, you've exceeded my expectations." Alex's eyes narrowed as a tall figure emerged from the shadows. A man with sharp features and piercing blue eyes, clad in the dark, angular armor of the consortium elite. "General Kale," Zana spat, her voice laced with venom. "You two know each other?" Alex asked, his blaster trained on the newcomer. Kale smirked. "We've crossed paths before. Haven't we, Zana?" "She betrayed you, didn't she?" Alex guessed. Kale's smirk widened. "Smart man." "Yes, Zana and I once shared a vision for this galaxy. But then she decided to take the high road, abandoning power in favor of peace. Such a shame. Power built on exploitation and suffering is no power at all," Zana shot back. Kale's expression darkened. "You always did love your moral high ground. But tell me, Zana, do you really believe this treaty will change anything? Or is it just another illusion to soothe your conscience?" "It will change everything," Zana said firmly. Kale chuckled. "We'll see." He gestured sharply, and the remaining consortium agents regrouped, forming a tight circle around him. "Alex," Zana said softly, her voice tinged with urgency. "The bond." Alex glanced at her. "What about it?" "I can use it," she said, "if you trust me." Alex hesitated. "Use it how?" Zana didn't answer. Instead, she stepped closer, placing her hand over his chest. A surge of warmth flooded through him, and suddenly, he could feel her presence more acutely than ever. A deep, resonant connection that defied explanation. "Whoa!" Alex murmured, his pulse quickening. Zana's markings flared, and her voice took on a commanding tone. "Now, Alex. Together." Without fully understanding, Alex nodded, his instincts taking over. The bond between them ignited, and a rush of energy coursed through their shared connection. Zana's power flowed into Alex, amplifying his strength and reflexes, while his steadiness anchored her volatile abilities. The result was explosive. Kale's forces charged, but Alex and Zana moved as one. Alex's blaster shots hit with pinpoint accuracy, guided by Zana's heightened awareness. Zana unleashed waves of energy that disarmed and incapacitated the agents, her control sharper than ever with Alex's presence stabilizing her. Kale watched with narrowed eyes, his confidence faltering. "Impressive," he admitted, drawing a sleek, double-edged plasma blade. "But let's see how you handle me." Kale lunged, his blade slicing through the air with deadly precision. Alex met him head-on, their weapons clashing in a burst of sparks. Zana stayed close, her energy weaving around them like a protective shield. "You're out of your depth, Greaves," Kale sneered, pressing Alex back. "Funny," Alex grunted, blocking another strike. "I was just about to say the same to you." With a sudden burst of strength, Alex forced Kale back, giving Zana an opening. She extended her hand, and a surge of energy struck Kale square in the chest, sending him sprawling. Kale staggered to his feet, his armor scorched and his expression livid. "This isn't over," he snarled. Before Alex or Zana could react, Kale activated a small device on his wrist. A bright light enveloped him, and he vanished in an instant, teleporting out of the chamber. "Damn it," Alex muttered, lowering his blaster. Zana sighed, her markings dimming as her energy waned. "He'll regroup. We've bought time, but he'll be back. And next time, he'll bring an army," Alex said grimly. Zana looked at him, her gaze steady despite the exhaustion in her eyes. "Then we'll be ready." With the immediate threat neutralized, Zana delivered the treaty to the summit delegates, her voice unwavering despite the chaos that had unfolded. Her words resonated, and one by one, the representatives pledged their support. The treaty was signed under heavy guard, marking a historic step toward unity. But Alex couldn't shake the feeling that their fight was far from over. As the summit concluded, Zana approached him on the observation deck of the embassy, where the crystalline ocean stretched endlessly beneath the stars. "You didn't have to stay," she said quietly. Alex smirked. "Yeah, well, I've got this whole bound by law thing going on. Kind of hard to ignore." Zana smiled faintly. "Thank you, Alex, for everything." "Don't thank me yet," he said, his expression serious. "Kale's still out there, and something tells me he's not the kind of guy who takes defeat lightly." Zana nodded, her gaze distant. "No, but we'll face him together." As the stars glittered above, Alex felt the bond between them strengthen. A connection forged in fire and bound by something deeper than either of them fully understood. The Vanguard Eclipse hummed with quiet energy as it cruised through the void of space. Alex sat in the cockpit, his feet propped up on the console, staring out at the endless expanse of stars. Zana was seated nearby, her hands folded in her lap as she reviewed the data they'd recovered from the embassy's archives. "Anything useful in there?" Alex asked, breaking the silence. Zana's markings flickered faintly as she looked up. "Plenty. Kale's network is larger than I anticipated. He's been working to consolidate his power for years. The consortium's reach extends to systems I didn't even realize were under their influence." Alex frowned. "And I'm guessing they're not going to sit quietly while we dismantle it." "No," Zana said, her tone heavy. "They'll retaliate. Kale will strike where we're weakest, using fear and subterfuge to destabilize the alliances we've just formed." "Great," Alex muttered. "So we've got a war brewing, and the guy leading the charge has a personal vendetta against us." "It's not just us," Zana said. "It's everything we represent. Kale thrives on chaos. Unity threatens his entire way of life." Alex leaned back, his fingers drumming on the console. "So what's the plan? We sit here and wait for him to make the first move?" Zana's gaze hardened. "No, we go on the offensive." Their first stop was Kashar Prime, a bustling hub of trade and diplomacy located in neutral space. The planet was a melting pot of species, its sprawling cities illuminated by bioluminescent flora and neon signs advertising everything from starship parts to exotic delicacies. "We're here to meet someone," Zana explained as they descended into the crowded streets. "Anyone I should know about?" Alex asked, scanning the crowd for potential threats. "Her name is Lyra," Zana said. "She's a former operative for the consortium. If anyone knows Kale's next move, it's her." The meeting took place in a shadowy cantina on the outskirts of the city. Lyra was already waiting for them, seated in a corner booth with a drink in hand. She was a tall, willowy woman with fiery orange hair and piercing gold eyes. "Well, well," she drawled as Zana and Alex approached. "If it isn't the galaxy's newest celebrity couple." "We're not a couple," Alex said immediately. "Could have fooled me," Lyra said with a sly grin. Zana ignored the remark, taking a seat across from Lyra. "We need information." "Of course you do," Lyra said, swirling her drink. "And let me guess, you're willing to pay handsomely for it?" "We'll compensate you fairly," Zana said evenly. Lyra's gaze flicked to Alex. "And what about you, hero? Got anything to offer?" "Just my winning personality," Alex said dryly. Lyra laughed. "Fair enough. All right, here's what I know. Kale's regrouping on a mining colony in the Outer Rim. He's using it as a staging ground to amass troops and resources." "Which colony?" Zana asked. Lyra leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper. Raxilin 7. It's remote, heavily fortified, and crawling with mercenaries. If you're planning to go there, you'd better be ready for a fight. Raxilin 7 was a harsh, desolate world of jagged cliffs and sulphurous skies. The mining colony sprawled across the surface like a metallic wound, its structures bristling with automated defenses and armed guards. This place looks like a fortress, Alex muttered as the vanguard eclipse approached the colony. It is, Zana said. But every fortress has its weaknesses. Sarah chimed in over the comms. I've analyzed the colony's layout. There's a service entrance on the eastern side of the complex. Minimal security, but it's a tight squeeze. Perfect, Alex said, steering the ship toward the coordinates. They landed under the cover of darkness, slipping into the colony undetected. The air was thick with the acrid smell of burning ore, and the sound of machinery echoed through the narrow corridors. Stay close, Alex whispered as they moved deeper into the complex. Their goal was simple: disrupt Kale's operations by destroying the colony's central command hub. But as they approached the target, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. That suspicion was confirmed when the lights suddenly flickered, and Kale's voice boomed through the intercom. Welcome, Lady Zana. I was hoping you'd come. Alex cursed under his breath. He's been expecting us. Keep moving, Zana said, her markings glowing brighter as she summoned her energy. We can't turn back now. The corridors erupted in chaos as Kale's forces descended on them. Alex and Zana fought side by side, their bond amplifying their strength and precision. But the odds were overwhelming, and with every step forward, the resistance grew fiercer. Finally, they reached the command hub, a massive, circular chamber filled with glowing screens and humming machinery. Kale was waiting for them, flanked by a squad of heavily armed guards. You're persistent, I'll give you that, Kale said, his blade gleaming as he stepped forward. Persistence is a virtue, Zana said, her voice steady. Kale smirked. Not when it leads to your doom. The battle that followed was a blur of violence and energy. Alex and Zana fought with a seamless synchronicity that left Kale momentarily off balance. But the Consortium General was a formidable opponent, his skill with a blade matched only by his cunning. You can't win, Zana, Kale said, deflecting her energy blasts with his plasma shield. Even if you destroy this colony, I have more. The Consortium's reach is infinite. Not if we cut you off at the head, Alex retorted, firing a shot that forced Kale to retreat. Kale's expression darkened. You think you've won just because you've formed your little alliances? You're naive, Greaves. The galaxy doesn't want peace. It wants power. And power always wins. Not this time, Zana said. With a surge of determination, she unleashed a wave of energy that shattered Kale's shield and sent him sprawling. Alex seized the opportunity, pinning the general to the ground with his blaster trained on his head. Call off your forces, Alex demanded. Kale chuckled, blood dripping from the corner of his mouth. You think killing me will stop this? The Consortium is bigger than me. You've already lost. Before Alex could respond, Kale activated a hidden detonator on his wrist. The room trembled as explosions erupted throughout the colony. The explosions reverberated through the command hub, shaking the walls and sending debris crashing to the floor. Alarms blared, and the hum of failing machinery underscored the chaos. Smoke filled the air, making it hard to see. Alex! Zana shouted, her markings flaring as she extended her energy to shield them from a falling beam. I'm fine, Alex called back, coughing as he scanned the room for Kale. The Consortium General was already on his feet, bloodied but grinning like a man who had just won the game. You can't stop the inevitable, Kale said, his voice carrying over the din. This colony is a tomb, and you'll die in it. Before Alex could fire, Kale activated his teleportation device and vanished in a flash of light. Damn it, Alex growled, slamming his fist into a nearby console. Zana placed a hand on his shoulder, her markings dimming. We need to move. This place won't hold much longer. Which way? Alex asked, glancing around as another explosion rocked the structure. There's a service tunnel beneath us, Zana said, pointing to a grated floor panel. "It leads to the mining shafts. If we hurry, we can reach the surface before this place comes down." Alex nodded, prying the grate open with a grunt of effort. They climbed down into the tunnel, the narrow passageway lit only by the flickering light of Zana's glowing skin. The tunnel twisted and turned, the heat from the colony's collapsing core growing more intense with every step. The roar of explosions echoed behind them, a constant reminder of how little time they had. "Almost there," Zana said, her voice tight with strain. Just as they reached the exit, a section of the tunnel caved in, blocking their path. "Of course," Alex muttered, drawing his blaster. "Stand back." He fired at the rubble, but the debris was too thick. Zana stepped forward, her markings blazing. "Let me." She extended her hands, and a surge of energy blasted through the blockage, disintegrating the debris into harmless dust. Beyond the opening, the pale light of Raxilin 7's sulfurous sky beckoned. They sprinted toward the surface, emerging just as the colony collapsed in a fiery explosion behind them. Back aboard the Vanguard Eclipse, Alex and Zana sat in the cockpit, their expressions grim as they stared at the smoldering remains of the colony on the view screen. "Well, that was a disaster," Alex said, leaning back in his chair. "Not entirely," Zana said. "We disrupted Kale's operations and set back his plans. That's a victory." "A victory he's going to make us pay for," Alex countered. "We're on his radar now, and he's not going to stop until we're out of the picture." "Then we'll stay one step ahead of him," Zana said firmly. "We have to. The fate of the galaxy depends on it." Alex sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You keep saying that like it's supposed to make me feel better." Zana smiled faintly. "Maybe it's not about feeling better. Maybe it's about believing that what we're doing matters." Alex glanced at her, and for a moment, the tension between them softened. "It does matter," he admitted, "even if it feels like we're fighting an uphill battle." "We are," Zana said, "but we're not alone. The alliances we've formed, those people believe in this fight. And so do I." Alex nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Then I guess we'd better make sure we don't screw it up." Their next move was clear: rally their allies and prepare for the inevitable counterstrike. The first stop was Zarin Station, a neutral outpost in the outer systems where several factions had agreed to meet. The station was a patchwork of rusted metal and glowing advertisements, its corridors bustling with traders, mercenaries, and diplomats. The meeting took place in a dimly lit chamber at the heart of the station. Representatives from the newly formed alliance filled the room, their faces tense with anticipation. Zana stood at the head of the table, her presence commanding despite the weight of recent events. Alex stood beside her, his arms crossed as he surveyed the room. "We've dealt a blow to the consortium," Zana began, her voice steady. "But Kale is far from defeated. He will retaliate, and when he does, we must be ready." The room erupted into murmurs, some voices expressing doubt, others anger. "Ready with what?" one delegate demanded. "Our fleets are scattered, our resources stretched thin. We can't fight a war on this scale." "Then we unite," Zana said. "We pool our resources, combine our strengths. Together, we can stand against the consortium and bring an end to their tyranny." "And if we fail?" another delegate asked. "We won't fail," Alex interjected, his voice firm, "because failure isn't an option. Not if we want to survive." The room fell silent, the weight of his words sinking in. Zana stepped forward, her gaze sweeping the room. "This is our moment. Our chance to shape the future of the galaxy. Will you stand with us?" One by one, the delegates nodded, their expressions resolute. The alliance was solidified. As the fleet began to assemble, reports flooded in from across the sector. The consortium was mobilizing, their forces massing at strategic points throughout the galaxy. Kale's shadow loomed over every decision, his presence a constant reminder of the stakes. Zana and Alex worked tirelessly, coordinating strategies, securing supply lines, and rallying troops. The bond between them continued to deepen, their connection a source of strength in the face of mounting challenges. But as the first battles loomed on the horizon, one question lingered in Alex's mind. Were they truly ready for the storm that was coming? The Vanguard Eclipse hovered near the shimmering nebula known as the Veil of Harith, where the Allied fleet was gathering. Ships of all sizes and designs floated against the backdrop of swirling colors, bulk carriers repurposed for war, sleek fighter squadrons, and the gleaming capital ships of more advanced systems. Alex leaned against the bulkhead of the Eclipse's war room, watching Zana as she projected tactical maps of the galaxy. The fleet was impressive, but as she outlined the consortium's growing strongholds, it was clear their forces were dwarfed by the opposition. "They outnumber us 3-1 in every sector," Alex said, crossing his arms. "Numbers aren't everything," Zana replied, her tone calm but firm. "The consortium's forces are spread thin, and many of their soldiers are fighting out of fear, not loyalty. If we strike with precision, we can disrupt their command structure and weaken their resolve." Alex frowned, studying the map. "What about Kale? He's their linchpin. You cut him out, the rest falls apart." "Easier said than done," Zana said. "Kale knows his importance. He'll be protected at every step." As they strategized, a message from the fleet's central command interrupted their conversation. A holographic figure materialized, Lyra, the former consortium operative. "We've got a problem," she said, her voice tight. "What kind of problem?" Alex asked. "Darnath mercenaries," Lyra replied. "A squad slipped into the fleet unnoticed. They planted sabotage devices on one of our cruisers, the Solace. It's set to explode any moment." Zana's markings flared in alarm. "What's the status of the crew?" "Evacuating, but it's chaos," Lyra said. "We don't know if we'll get them all off in time." Alex clenched his fists. "We're on it." The Solace was a hulking ship designed for troop transport, now teetering on the brink of destruction. Flames licked at its hull as evacuation pods launched in waves. But as Alex and Zana docked the Vanguard Eclipse, it was clear the situation was dire. "We've got less than 10 minutes before that thing blows," Alex said, strapping his blaster to his hip. "Then we'll have to move fast," Zana replied, her voice steady despite the urgency. The corridors of the Solace were a cacophony of alarms and panicked voices. Soldiers and crew members scrambled toward the escape pods, but a group of mercenaries was still aboard, guarding the sabotage devices with ruthless precision. Alex and Zana split up to cover more ground. Alex fought his way through the lower decks, his blaster cutting down enemies with practiced efficiency. The mercenaries were well armed, but they hadn't counted on Alex's relentless determination, or the strange, instinctive edge the bond with Zana seemed to give him. Meanwhile, Zana ascended to the command center, her energy surging as she faced off against a squad of Darnath operatives. Her movements were fluid and precise, each strike of her energy disarming or incapacitating her foes. "Zana, status?" Alex called over the comms. "Almost there," she replied, her breath labored. "I've disarmed the first 2 devices. How about you?" "Working on the last one," Alex said, gritting his teeth as he exchanged fire with the remaining mercenaries. The final device was located in the ship's reactor core, its countdown ticking ominously. "Zana, I need help," Alex shouted. Moments later, Zana appeared, her markings blazing with light. Together, they disarmed the device with seconds to spare. The 2 of them sprinted back to the Vanguard Eclipse, barely making it out before the Solace erupted in a controlled detonation that saved the rest of the fleet. Back aboard the Eclipse, Alex sat in the cockpit, nursing a gash on his arm. Zana stood nearby, her expression troubled. "That wasn't random," Alex said.